Morning. How are we doing, mates? So, yesterday I tried to do this live, and I was situated like 10 feet that way in my garden. And I live in Florida, and it's hot as shit, and I was flowing, and it was awesome, and then my phone overheated, and I lost the whole thing. So, here we are again today. It's a Saturday, so I'm not expecting much engagement, but I just like to go live and riff, and I'll leave this up on the main page. And I'm answering a couple of questions that came in on an Ask Me Anything a couple days back. And the two questions were essentially, what are my thoughts on the mass farming of animals for consumption, being that I am a meat eater and I'm a proponent of meat eating? And then there was a follow-up question from a different person asking about the ethical, moral, and spiritual considerations to eating meat. This idea that, eating meat might hinder one's connection, compassion, spirituality, and those kind of things. So I think it's a distinct two-part conversation, and I think what I'll attempt to try and do is stay as on track as possible. But if you guys are even remotely familiar with me, you will know that I am a wordy bastard. So I'll do my best to keep it as succinct as possible, knowing that that's probably going to still be a 15 to 20 minute rant. So if you're here, buckle up and then let me know your thoughts, because what I want to preface saying this is here, I am not an expert. I'm not an expert on soils and the environment and the ozone layer, and I am just going to try to give you my informed opinion and how I came about those opinions. And I'm going to try and keep the first half of this focused on more of the environmental issues, and I'm going to try and keep the second half of this focused more on the spiritual implications, the moral and ethical considerations to consuming meat. So the environmental stuff, right? Because I'll start with this story that it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago when Cowspiracy came out, and I distinctly remember watching it. And I watched it with my wife Nicole, and I took to Facebook afterwards, and I basically wrote a status that was like, I have some serious thinking to do, because I just watched this show, and this documentary painted the agricultural or the big farming model as the number one driver of climate change, and essentially like cow farts are killing the planet and the amount of water it takes to feed them, and also it highlighted some other obvious problems with CAFO operations, caged animal feeding operations, more commonly known as factory farms, which is the horrendous living conditions of these animals and the torturousness of a life like that. And I watched it, and it hit deep. It really made me question. It shook me up in the best kind of way. I like that. I like being shook up, because I'm not a person who wants to always think I'm right. I'm a person that likes to, be challenged by new ideas. I think ideas need a willing participant to dance with, and this idea invited me to dance. But what I didn't do is also completely outsource, that my beliefs on that. I said, wow, that is really friggin' interesting. And I also dropped back into a little bit more of my rational brain and said, okay, well, this is a Netflix documentary, and the goal of a Netflix documentary is to get views. And yeah, there could be benevolence around those views, of course, but there's always there's usually an agenda at play. People want you. So maybe it's presented in a particularly inflammatory way for a reason. So let me see some of the opposing views here. One of the Stoic philosophers, Seneca, I read a lot of his work growing up, and he was always, saying, read like a spy. Read like a spy, and what that meant was, if you're very rooted firmly in your beliefs, then you should read like a spy on the other side's beliefs and really challenge those beliefs, because you might have something to learn by entertaining new beliefs, and you must remember that if you believe something strongly and deeply, and somebody is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, and they believe something that is counter to your belief system as strongly and passionately on their side, well, they believe that for a reason too. Maybe as much of a reason that you have for believing what you believe. So I said, wow, this was really confronting. I was eating meat then. I was actually eating way less meat than I do now. Coincidentally, and I'll explain that, but it shook me up, so I said, all right, let me do some research here. So I went to look at some of these claims, the greenhouse gas emissions, the cow farts, and, went to read opposing views to try that, idea of reading like a spy. And I think, what it boiled down to ultimately is this idea between how we are raising and farming these animals, and this idea that it's not necessarily the cow, it's the how. And if you break the ecological system, the balance, the way nature intended things, you cause problems. And the reason we did this, by the way, was to be a solution to a problem that we were facing. And the problem that we were facing was that we are exploding as a human population. In particular, we were. I think it's kind of leveling off now, but we're still getting bigger. 7.5 billion souls on this planet, and the food system was not quite keeping up. And we will get into this later, because what we can talk about is the nutritional differences between animals and plants. But this is a hard and true fact, and the animals are more nutritious than plants are. So the goal of to feed the masses was, well, how do we get the most nutritious food on people's plates in a sustainable manner that's not too expensive, and we can do it en masse as we explode as a culture. So there's the problem, that we're getting larger. We're trying to feed more people, and we're trying to do it in a sustainable way. But when you force solutions onto a problem without the holistic bird's eye view, you are likely to create new problems. We have seen this year with COVID, right? With the COVID restrictions. The problem is COVID. Oh my God, we're all going to get sick and die. The solution is lockdown, mass vaccinate, and now we're starting new problems with, injuries and addictions and suicides and opiate use is up and violence in the homes. So when you force solution on a problem, you can create new problems, and I believe that's exactly what we did. And potentially from a virtuous standpoint of trying to help more people get access to more sustainable food. But then you can't do that, well, you certainly can, and this is an argument, but it wasn't thought deeply enough about. It was just, how do we do this cheap and quick and effective? And basically we're looking at that system now. It's the factory farming model. It's the taking of animals off their native lands. It's colonization in a way, right? And it's putting them into these artificial environments that we've decided is somehow better, that we now control, and this is better, and this is how you're going to live. And we confine these animals to a feedlot, and then we pump them full of antibiotics, and we have to give them vaccines prophylactically because we know they're going to get sick, because they're living, with no access to sunshine, and they're knee deep in their own shit, and it's really terrible. Not to mention that a lot of the feed that is grown from plant-based stuff is used to feed cows and chickens, and it's this byproduct of feed that is being produced that's not really for human consumption grade. So we're growing plants to feed animals that eat plants that don't need to be grown. A cow can be on pasture taking the food on the ground, which is grass. Then the grass is growing because of the sunlight. It's such a beautiful symbiotic relationship, and we're saying, nah, that's not efficient. Takes too long. Let's just pump them full of growth hormones and steroids, and we'll bang them out in a couple of months, and we'll grow chickens that are so fat that they can't even support their own weight, and they break the legs, and we'll stick 1,000 of them in this thing, and it'll be a really good idea because it'll be cheaper. But I mean, again, there's a potentially naive nobility to that idea, because it was like, let's feed people good food for cheap. But again, we cause new problems, and I'm fully on board with this idea that factory farms are a really big problem. They're a very big problem because they've broken the cycle. They've broken it, and it's causing these new problems. However, again, it's not the cow, it's not the chickens, it's not the pigs, it's the how we're doing it. And I do believe from further research and looking at the work that's put out, especially by like some sustainable ranchers. Joel Salatin is amazing in this field. The book called The Sacred Cow by Rob Wolf and Diana Rogers, examining this. It's possible to do this on a much larger scale than we're doing it in a regenerative agriculture way. Now, what does that mean? Well, the way we're currently farming both animals and plants, because going plant-based is not the solution, I'll explain why in a minute, is not regenerative. It's injurious to our soils. It's about taking, and we're taking, and we're taking, and we're raping our soils, and we're pulling, and we're not giving anything back. And we're treating the Earth's resources and our ability to manipulate those like an infinite source. And it's not even it shouldn't be treated like a resource. We need to redevelop the symbiotic relationship with everything, with the animals, with the soils, with the plants. So regenerative model is understanding that exact thing. That if plants are going to grow efficiently, they need healthy soils. And healthy soils are dependent on the organism as a whole, which means the animals on there that take shit, and the shit, becomes feed for the bacteria, and the mycorrhizal networks grow underneath the soil, and they throw out nutrients across the board and they sequester carbon into the ground, which is healthy soils, and then the plants have more nutrition in them, and by virtue the animals are more nutritious, and the animals are not being raised in this man-made environment that's causing them to be so full of fear and adrenaline and death and unhealthy stuff. If you are what you eat, you are what you eat eats too. There's a cost to this stuff. There's a cost to an animal. It's not the same animal to take a grass-fed cow raised close by you that spent all of its life on a pasture and was loved and grew for years and had one bad day, versus a cow that spent the last half of its life confined to a feedlot, being pumped full of medications and strapped into a shackled head harness and forced GMO corn that was used to produce, to feed these animals, and the pesticide use and all of that stuff. So again, caged animal feeding operations, factory farms, a big problem. But it's not the solution to stop eating animals altogether. In fact, I believe we need to get animals back on pasture, and we need to redevelop and mimic rotationally grazing these animals the way that they were doing long before we got our big fucking nosy heads involved and started to mess with the system. And the key here is that it is possible. People have done this research. There's billions of hectares of land on this earth right now that are only suitable. They're arable lands. They're only suitable for agriculture, regenerative agriculture. Look at the work of Alan Savory. Look how he's taken these deserted lands and he's put animals back on them, and they've come back to life. These deserts, literal food deserts, have come back to life, and they're teeming with abundance of greenery, and soils are healthy, and the animals are healthy, and birds are coming back, and this can be done. It can absolutely be done. But now we're talking about something bigger, which is a capitalist system and money and human greed interests and corporate interests and the dominator culture that we live in. But let's shelve that for a minute and let's look, okay, well, if animals and maybe I'm just not going to, I'm not going to eat animals, and then I'm going to be part of the solution. Noble. You've got to remember the thing with the vegan and plant-based narrative is that it's so bloody attractive. Of course it's attractive. Like this neat little package of a hand grenade that the vegans can lob over the fence and then, run away because it's like, it's better for you, it's better for the planet, it's better for the animals, it's better, be more, don't hurt animals. Like, that sounds good. Why wouldn't we all want that? Now, you examine that house of cards and it crumbles very, very quickly, because there is blood on your plate regardless of how you eat. There is blood on your plate regardless of how you eat. Firstly, life eats life, right? This is the, Mufasa says it to Simba. Is it Mufasa? I don't know. No, Rafiki's the monkey. Mufasa says it to Simba at the beginning of the movie when they're looking out over the plains. He's like, he says something similar, like life eats life. You'll eat these animals, one day the land will eat you. And it's ancient. It's forever. It's since antiquity that life has eaten life. And we're an extension of that. It's represented deeply in myth, through the Ouroboros, so the snake eating its tail. So it's circular, because a circle, where does it begin and where does it end? And life is circular. And, the earth breeds these things and they get eaten, and then we eat it, and one day we'll go back into the earth and we will be eaten, and it's all cyclical. It's all the Ouroboros. So to kind of, pull yourself out of that and say, I'm not playing that game anymore, it doesn't really jive with evolutionary history and biology. It's not really where we came from, and it causes new issues. Because now if you start to push everybody to this plant-based solution, if we now start to say the only way we're going to reverse climate change and stop this is to stop mass factory farming and stop the consumption of animals altogether because it's just terrible for the planet and cow farts are going to destroy everything and it's mean, then we're all going to go plant-based. Okay, well, now we're forcing another solution that could potentially bring about new problems. And what are those new problems? Because let me pose a question to you first. Do you think that me eating some ground beef, one ingredient, ground beef, that came from a farm that is 10 miles from my house, that came from a cow that was raised on pasture, that had no drugs, no antibiotics, no vaccines, lived in the sunshine, ate grass as its only food source, the grass that the soil was giving it, and has traveled 10 miles, and is it now being ate by me as a one ingredient meal, because I'll form it into a burger patty and I'll put it on there with some salt and pepper, and now I eat that burger. Do you think there is more kind of environmental stress and death on my plate versus somebody that now is eating a Beyond Burger? that is made up of over 20 ingredients. The second ingredient in there is like a canola oil, which is an oil produced in a factory that is requiring quinoa and millet and this thing flown in from this part of the world and this thing from there, and the rice protein and the pea protein and the agricultural tax on the soils to produce those things. You know, the one thing you'll hear a lot of farmers, if you're really connected to these people and you understand it and you watch them work, which I was for 4 years. I lived in farm country, Pennsylvania, and I connected with these farmers and I watched their unbelievable relationship to the animals and to the soil, knowing full well one day that that was also going to be slaughtered. And they were salt of the earth people. They were more connected than anybody to this symbiotic relationship with life. And you'll talk to grain farmers and find out how many birds, ground-dwelling animals, snakes and mice are killed as they churn those fields and they run through and they blast the pesticides everywhere. How many deaths are in that versus that farmer that is raising a few cattle and feeding it on one ingredient alone? Right? Where's more blood on your plate? Just because you're not consuming muscle meat, do not make the mistake of thinking that you are not contributing to death. You cannot walk on this earth without contributing to death. And it is a natural part of life. And I think, you know, the word death, we get so sticky about it, and we realize that every single day we're dying. You know, it's this beautiful decay that we're getting older, and every single day we spend longer in this life, we're getting closer to our ultimate death and decay and demise. And that's very, very important. And life eats life, and it is the Ouroboros, and it is circular again, and it is holistic, and it cannot be broken. And if we broke it and we try and stick a fork in the wheel because we think we're so smart and compassionate by just not eating a fucking burger that we're going to save the world, we're delusional. Because again, the cost of the environmental impact, the CO2 emissions of traveling that meal on my plate that is a beef burger or a steak taken from a cow that was grown locally to me that was fed on grass versus somebody that's eating an acai bowl with Brazilian stuff flown in from the Amazon and an avocado on the side from Mexico and your bananas from Peru and your pineapple from Costa Rica and your cashew nuts on top of it, where your farmers in India were farming for those cashews and they were getting burns all up their arm because their bosses were saying, these are really trendy now with white folks who lives in cities, so let's mine them. Who cares about your health? We're going to pay you pennies on the dollar. Let's just get those cashews to these people because they're super trendy so we can have cashew milk, when God gave us like 5 animals to get milk from, and now we want to milk almonds. And people think it's a cruelty-free thing to consume almond milk instead of milk from a cow. When that cow, again, factory farms, no bueno, don't drink that milk, it's shit. Local raw milk from a farmer that is raising cows that they love and they're treating them with respect and they're giving you a nutritious superfood, is again much kinder than you going to the supermarket, probably driving in your fancy SUV to go into your Whole Foods to pay $6.99 for an almond milk that required all of the farmers of bees in the US at a particular season to ship those bees to the west coast of California so they can unleash them to pollinate the trees so they can produce the almonds and spray those with pesticides and herbicides and cause the chemical burns and completely disrupt the bee pollination, the bees' capacity to understand where they are in the world. And we're factory farming bees for those things, but it's almond milk, so it's cruelty free, right? You know, it goes much, much deeper, this stuff. And this trendy vegan narrative of like, oh, better for the planet, better for the people, better for the environment, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't hold any water. It's a popular idea from rich white people. And that's why it's only easy to eat a vegan diet inside of cities. I backpacked for 5 years. I went all over the fucking world. The idea of veganism would be laughable to these people. They're so deeply connected to the land. The idea of not having the symbiotic relationship where the son and the father go out at 6 a.m. in the morning to go and hunt the fish that they're going to get from diving with a fucking spear at night, and the women back on the tribe are foraging for whatever they can get from the trees or the tropical berries or the roots, and coming back at the end of the day and celebrating life by eating life and knowing that that animal that they are consuming is becoming them. What is more beautiful than that? Living in a high-rise apartment in New York City and eating your acai bowl every day because it's kinder, because it's more woke, because you can hashtag cruelty-free? Is it really? What are the cost of your choices? Your choices do matter. And that's the dangerous issue with the environmental arguments around a plant-based diet, because it's so trendy and it's so sexy and it's so neatly packaged and it's got big money behind it. Because there could potentially be a deeper layer here. There is a conspiracy going on that is an attack on human health. And if you don't believe that, I don't know what to tell you. Open your eyes. And a part of that agenda is to weaken the human spirit by taking them away from their natural food. and the natural food that gives them sovereignty and health and vitality and fucking strength. And that's the real food that nature grows. It's not eating soybeans. It's not eating kale shakes. It's eating that stuff, and we've been fed a lie, and it's a part of that. And it makes people wealthy. You want to think that this is about, saving the planet and being more benevolent, and then you look at the people that are the biggest drivers of this, and you get right back down to Billy Boy Gates, who's now the #1 farmland owner in the United States of America. And if that doesn't terrify you, remember that this is the same madman that wants to spray particles into the ozone layer to block the sun. So environmentally speaking, do we have a really big task on our hand? Yeah, we do. We really do. And I don't know how big that is, and I'm never going to pretend to be an environmentalist or a professional here. Do I believe that not eating animals is the solution? No. Do I believe that plant-based diets are the solution? No. I think they're going to cause more problems. I think this utopian view of everybody living off beans and rice and corn and these other plant derivatives are going to require all of that land that now Bill, this is why he's getting it, right, to be monocropped and breaking that symbiotic relationship with food. These foods are going to be very unhealthy because our soils are destroyed, absolutely destroyed. So we need strong, man-made chemical fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, rodenticides, fungicides. We need those, right? And then what is that going to do? Also, if we're worried about cow farts destroying the planet, what are we going to do when every human is farting 24/7 around the clock because they're living off fucking beans? Because guess what? We're not designed to live off beans. So there's so many more problems with this trendy plant-based narrative, and it's missing the forest for the trees. It's not the cow, it's the how. And I get it, this regenerative agriculture model that rehabilitates the soil so the plants and the animals can have a symbiotic relationship and we can get into that is not as easy access. It's certainly not accessible for lower income families right now. It's certainly an issue of privilege and accessibility. I understand that. But also, don't mistake that for being the biggest problem, because if you don't think that veganism is a flex of your privilege, you are so wrong. Because there are countries, cultures in the world that the only real nutritious food they're getting is a small amount of meat that they can get every week, and you want to take that away because it's cruel? Well, how cruel is that? How cruel is that? By not doing harm to animals, how cruel is it to do a harm to us as an animal? Whether that's yourself, right? Like, we get now a little bit more into the physiology of this, and your physiology outweighs your philosophy. I'm sorry, but it just does. There's a reason why in the vegan and plant-based circles, these huge people with massive followings that are making a living from talking about doing vegan, they revert. There's numerous examples of them. Go famous ex-vegan and just look at all of that, and look at the attacks that they get. Look how the crowd come after them. And why do they quit veganism? It's not because they don't believe in what they were going for. It's because their health starts to deteriorate. Because there are certain things that you cannot get on a plant-based diet that you can get from animal-based nutrition. Which is why I'm a proponent of it. Because if you think about the intentionality that anybody puts behind their diet, it's very, very low. Most people aren't thinking at all about what they eat, and now you're going to take away the one thing that's actually giving them real nutrition, and you're supplementing it with something that is subpar, because you want to talk about vitamin A, right? Okay, well, I'll eat carrots. Carrots have high vitamin A? No, they don't. They have high beta carotenes, which are a plant version of vitamin A. But how much does that convert into bioavailable, usable retinol? Very, very low. What about your omegas? Oh, I'll eat my chia seeds. Well, the problem with that is it's not EPA and DHA. EPA and DHA only come from animals. And the conversion of this alpha-linoleic acid, this plant-based omega, is very, very low. So nutritional deficiencies start to become rife. And eventually, the body will turn to other sources to meet its nutritional requirements. Gluconeogenesis will happen. Your body will start to chew its own muscle. Your body will start to deteriorate itself. And now you might not be eating animals, but your body in turn starts to eat an animal, and the animal is yourself. And if the goal of veganism and plant-based diet is to do the least harm, what is the harm done to a diet that's devoid in the nutrition, that denies you of your ability to be the best version of yourself and impact change in this world as a person that can actualize that through their actions and through their votes and through their consciousness? Because if you remove that and you diminish your consciousness, all for the sake of not eating the cow because you don't want to contribute to that pain, what pain are you causing yourself to live a life being less than you can be? because I don't believe that you can be all that you can be long term on a plant-based diet. Because while people typically can do well for a year to a few years because of the body's amazing resilience and capacity to store vital nutrition in the liver, and some genetic differences, that maybe people can get away with this for a few years and they'll slowly come back. So the solution is not to move away from our evolutionary traits and pretend that we don't have this thing called evolution that existed for a reason, and the reason that our brains on the evolutionary timeline exploded, not literally because we wouldn't be here, but figuratively exploded, doubled in size. The only logistical thing that we come across time and time and time again is that we humans started to eat meat, right? We started to collaborate, we started to communicate, then we started to, go, oh, me and you can work together. And then, because we're weak in the wild, we're not impressive. We can't swim, very long distances. We can't hold our breath. We can't fly. We're not very fast. We're very weak physically. Put you in a ring with a gorilla, good luck, mate. But put 100 of us in an environment where we can communicate and build tools and hunt woolly mammoths and now eat that meat, and that meat becomes amino acids, and amino acids are what we are, a protein-making factory, and our tissues grow and our brains grow, and now that creates the capacity and potential for more diverse and unique language, and now we're collaborating. That's our genius. That's why we're here. That's not because of soybeans. That's not because of broccoli. It's because of meat. Meat is a part of our lineage. It's a part of our heritage. If you're white like me and you track your ancestry back, you're going to come about something Northern European somewhere along the line. Your white ass ancestors like mine, hundreds of thousand years ago, were walking on lands that were covered in snow for 6 months of the year. Where are you getting your broccoli, your green beans? You think you're pulling, your tubers out of frozen ground? You weren't. You were eating meat. Literally, meat. The occasional bug if you could find it. It was an animal-based diet, and that's why when you remove a lot of the shit of the modern diet and you put in the animal-based diet back in as the core principle, we respond very, very well. Our body knows exactly what to do with it. It's an evolutionary friendly food. It fits with our biology, and the body knows exactly what to do with it. You remove that, the most nutritious part of the diet, and you try to substitute it with all of these plants, and you can run into problems. So, the last point worth making is this idea of it not being spiritual, woke, to contribute to the murder and death and consumption of animals. Now, I'll be honest again, I met resistance to this idea as I was going deeper on my spiritual path. I'm going to pick this up for 1 second because my timer's going off on the brisket, funnily, which is pretty funny, isn't it? So I was confronted by this idea as I was getting deeper into my spiritual journey and wanted to understand, right, can I morally, justify this consumption of meat if I want to be a kind, compassionate, spiritual soul? So I went into a plant medicine journey with that intention of asking whatever it is, my higher self, my soul, God, consciousness, for the answer, and the answer that I received was a resounding yes. And it's an offshoot of some of those ideas that I just gave to you, which is your role here is to be the healthiest version of yourself. And to be the healthiest version of yourself, you have to follow nutritionally sound principles. And because life eats life, and we come back to that beautiful symbiotic relationship of the Ouroboros, or the eternal knot of where there is no beginning and end, when I eat that animal becomes me. And it gets to live through me, and it gets to channel my vitality and my words and actions into this world. And one day I will go back into this earth and of this earth, and I will be consumed by it. And that is my mitsu, of course. What is here, consciously transmitting this to you, will not die with this. So have no fear about that, my friends. The only thing I can tell you about death is that it is incredibly safe. But I got that message, I got that download, and in the integration period afterwards, I asked my teacher, who was a shamanic practitioner, had spent a long time in both India, which is a vegetarian culture, and in the Amazon, which is a, with the ayahuasqueros and the tobacoeros. And these are the most spiritual people you've ever met in your life. They're the most connected to everything. And he was going through it, coming from India, plant-based, into these cultures, and what he noticed very quickly was that the shamans were given the best food, and the best food was the hunt, the muscle meat from the animal, the organ meats, because they had to be strong. They had to be the strongest ones in the tribe to hold the space for the rest of the tribe. They would also use nutritionally sound principles, like when the women were trying to get pregnant, they would feed them the best, most nutritious food to make them the most fertile. If they had an elder in the tribe, they would feed him the art of a fresh hunt from the deer, because the heart keeps the heart healthy. And they knew this, and they didn't know this because of PubMed or science. They knew this because they talk to nature. They have a beautifully interwoven conscious connection to nature. And my teacher asked his teacher, how do you morally and consciously consume meat? And he said that he just kind of looked at him and laughed at him like an old wise elder laughs at a young little boy and said, son, God eats God. God eats everything. God eats everything. Now, whether you've got some baggage with the G word, I know it has a lot of baggage, but life eats life. We're back to this. I believe that if I am to do the most good in this world and be the most conscious and spiritual version of myself, to serve my medicine the best way that I can do it, that it's important for me to be the best version of myself. And one fundamental aspect of that is to eat to fuel my vitality, my prana, my life force, my spirit. And I believe that that is through meat consumption. And by the way, I've tried the other ways and they don't work for me. And maybe that's because of my evolution, and maybe your evolution is slightly different, and maybe you're genetically gifted and you can get away with less of that, but you cannot get away with none of that. Not for long. You will suffer. And this dangerous push to get everybody to move away from meat in the idea that we're going to save the planet by creating probably more impact here, as well as a worsening health of our human beings, which, by the way, if you look at the environmental impact of that, how environmentally toxic and how environmentally impactful is it to have a nation, I live in America right now, where 70% of people are overweight or obese, and only 12% of the population is metabolically healthy. All of that electricity, all of those drugs, all of that fake food to keep people alive, that if you just fed them the way nature intended from the off, they wouldn't even be there. And we'd stay connected to our land, and we'd stay connected to our humanness, and we wouldn't be separate from it. So, do I believe that you can access the best, most spiritual self while consuming meat? I absolutely do. And I think that the way you vote with your dollar counts. And I think that you want to contribute to healing with your dollar, not contributing to feeding yourself the factory farm rubbish and the non-organic plant-based rubbish, because those things are hurting our mother. They are damaging the soils. And we're close. And once the soil is fucked, we're done. We are done. Once the soil is done, once the trees are done, we are done. And look what's happening to those populations. And to a degree, a lot of the trees are being taken down to make room for feedlot operations, which is so ass backwards when you consider that we've got billions of hectares of land that we could put animals back on and rekindle our relationship to that, the way it's always been. When the natives got colonized in America, what did they do to the buffalo? They killed them all. They put millions of buffalo on burn piles and burned them, because that was their native food, and they wanted to make them reliant upon white man food, and they did it. And what has happened ever since then? And we've forced these solutions, and we've created new problems, and now it's very trendy and it's very woke to think that by going plant-based you're going to save the world, save the day, not contribute to any death and suffering, which is just naive and foolish. You probably don't understand the world. You're probably a wealthy white person, you probably live in a city, and you probably have this very utopian or dystopian view of the world, and you're harming your health in the process. Or do we go back to the way it was supposed to be? Do we try our very best to support the people that are doing it in a regenerative manner? And do we work on ourselves, because it's the only fucking thing we can do? If we want to turn this thing around, which I think we do, I really think we do, I think we need to do it before it's too late, then the only way we can possibly do that is with the personal responsibility at the level of individual to be the best version of themselves, to be all that they can be. And you cannot be all that you can be if you're nutritional deficient and lacking in vitality because you're stuffing your face with cabbage and edamame. And that is my opinion. Just my opinion. Not speaking as an authority. Do not try to make me an authority. I am just speaking my truth with as much fire, love, and passion as I can speak it, and what you do with that is completely up to you. And I please invite anybody that does not agree with these ideas to challenge me in a non-combative way, because I believe that dialogue is how we understand each other more. So if you're watching and you're like, this dude's lost the plot, and you've got some other ideas and some new research, send it my way, baby, because I'm all ears. And if I improve wrong and this is the way we go and that's the way, then I will give up my ribeyes and T-bones, and I will give up my briskets from my grass-fed farmer who I'm supporting, who is healing the land, and I will eat this beige slop. But I just don't think you're going to do it, because I don't think it's realistic, and I don't think that's what the data suggests. And I think we've got to get out of this dangerous idea, and I think that it's not woke and it's not spiritual to not eat meat, because it's at the expense of the aggression on the meat suit that you are carrying yourself within. And it's up to you to be the best version of yourself you can be. So with that said, now fucking stay. Peace out. I'm going to go get my brisket off the smoker, and I'll love you guys. Thank you. If you like this, I don't know, comment, let me know what you thought, share it. I really appreciate your time, because that seemed like it was really fucking long, but thank you. Whoa, you guys are awesome. Peace and love, and meat.